So,
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the second half of the books from August 1967. This is Marvel Reread Club, and we continue to have a special guest, George O'Connor. Welcome, George.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, so I should explain that hopefully people are listening to every episode of Marvel Reread Club in order from beginning to end, but some people, because of how Apple Podcast does it, may be listening backwards, which is an absolutely horrific thought to us. But in case you are, we should reintroduce George. So George is the author of 12 wonderful children's graphic novels called The Olympians, and now he is doing a series of new graphic novels about the Norse gods called Asgardians. And the question I did not ask you last time, George, is the number one question my wife has for you, which is how many Asgardian books are there going to be?
Only 4.
Only 4?
Yeah, there's just not as much Norse mythology as there's Greek mythology. So book 3, which is Loki, is already done, just waiting to get into all your hands. And I'm currently, as we are recording, I'm working on book 4, which is Ragnarok, where, spoilers, everybody dies.
What?
Wait, what?
So wait, are you literally penciling it while you're talking to us? You said that as we speak. Okay. So are you at your drafting table?
I am literally at my drafting table. And I am literally occasionally, I always have my sketchbook out in front of me. My sketchbook, I always refer to as my hard drive for my memory. I am occasionally making drawings as I talk to you. That's not a sign of disrespect. I actually pay more attention when I doodle. So like when I go to lectures or something, sure, I'm almost always drawing. It actually helps me to stay more focused. I think it's different halves of the brain. I'll tell you what I've drawn. I've drawn a few different designs for the god Hermod. I've been drawing shots of Hel, the goddess of Hell. I've been drawing some of Sleipnir, the 8-legged steed of Odin. Like, I'm literally doodling as we talk.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So it's funny that in the MCU, we've seen Sleipnir, but we've never seen it in Marvel Comics. I don't think there's ever once been a Marvel comic in which Odin had an 8-legged horse, which strikes me as so strange because it's such a great visual.
Wait, where do we see Sleipnir?
We see Sleipnir in the very first movie when Thor has taken his friends to invade Jotunheim, and then Odin comes to get him, and Odin shows up on an 8-legged horse.
Cool. I got to rewatch that. Do you all know in mythology, Sleipnir is the son of Loki? Yeah.
Yes.
I'd forgotten that.
And Loki is actually
Loki's
mother.
The mom. Loki becomes a lady horse in order to seduce the horse Svadilfari, who helps the master builder and kind of runs off and does the unspeakable deed with this horse and then disappears for a few months. Well, 11 months, I guess, and comes back with like, hey, look, I have this great 8-legged horse, which isn't weird at all. Odin, you want this horse? Odin's like, yeah. It's all weird. It's very weird.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. Go on.
Go on, Steve. What were you going to say?
No, I just wanted to say that we have not gotten around to saying it at the beginning of an episode yet, but I just wanted to say that we have started up a Patreon in case anyone wants to throw us a couple bucks as just a tip for the work that we do here. That is at patreon.marvelrereadclub.com. So if you feel like doing something, great. If not, if you just want to listen, I do that to lots of podcasts. So that's fine too.
Yes. Okay. Well, that would be wonderful. We'd really appreciate that. Okay. Should we go ahead and jump back in with the rest of the books from August 1967?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Fantastic Four number 65 from the Deadly Lips of Ronan. I Accuse. This book is, like very few of the books we do on this podcast, a book I own. I have it somewhere downstairs, signed by Stan Lee.
Wow.
I should try to sell it at some point, I guess. But this was once again a book that we got from a church lady who gave us some old books she had in the basement. And I own it. So then Ronan is an interesting character. He will later be blue-skinned, but now he is Caucasian-skinned for some reason on the cover of this issue and on the inside. And we see him attacking with a giant hammer. Ronan will be an interesting character. He will have a long history. It's very interesting that we have Ronan and Crystal in this book, and Ronan and Crystal will later get married. They will get married many, many years later.
Wait.
I don't think I knew that.
What?
Sort of forced marriage, but then they try to actually make a go of it, and they try to love each other. So of all the characters in Marvel books at this point, it's funny that the two that Crystal will eventually marry are Quicksilver over in the Avengers and Ronan in this book, who she never actually meets in this issue, and never Johnny.
This is blowing my mind. I've never heard of this before.
This is during the whole Annihilation era. So this would be in the books of the aughts. It says, from beyond this planet Earth, conceived and created by the costly celebrated combo of Stan the Manly and Jack King Kirby, embellished by Joe Sinnott, lettered by Ari Simek. I just love these intro boxes. We probably waste a lot of time on this podcast reading every single one of them, but they're just so delightful, and you just can't not. Stan's love of alliteration is just wonderful.
That is not time wasted.
No. We begin with all four Fantastic Four having the same dream at the same time. We just get a little glimpse of the supreme intelligence of the Kree, who we won't get to see more of until a couple years later in Captain Marvel. Oh, Ben and Johnny find out they each had the same nightmare. How do they find out? Well, it's pretty easy for them to find out. They share a bed. They share a big queen size or king size bed here, and Ben has this nightmare which causes him to fall out of bed, and Johnny's like, that's odd, why isn't Ben in my bed with me? He must have fallen out because he had a nightmare. And it's like, Johnny, I think what's odd here is that you two share a bed. That's kind of the odd thing here.
Lee tries to explain it away a little bit, saying, next time, I don't care how late we gotta work. I'm going home to sleep in my own tree. And I'm like, I thought did Ben have his own apartment? I always thought he slept in the Baxter building, which the only way this would make sense is if he did have his own apartment and had to crash in the Baxter building, and maybe this is the softest space for him to do this. But yeah, it really took me out of the story.
Yeah, quite strange. Then they check in with Reed and Sue, who find out they've had the same nightmare. This reminds me very much of my favorite Fantastic Four comic of all time, which is actually not a Lee Kirby issue. It's Fantastic Four 236 by John Byrne, which also begins with all four Fantastic Four having similar nightmares and checking in with each other in the morning and figuring out that that's what's going on. So then we get to an infamous panel. So many infamous panels with Reed and Sue. They have such a toxic relationship. And indeed, we get a real glimpse of their toxic relationship here. So this is really interesting. She is suddenly starting to go like, I am tired of being in the Fantastic Four, which is something that is going to become more and more of an issue, especially as she gets pregnant and has a child. But she is already saying here, I want to set up housekeeping as Mrs. Reed Richards. I want to be involved with supermarkets instead of supervillains. Which is like, okay, this is an urge for domesticity we haven't really seen at this point. He won't accept it, reaches out, grabs her, pulls her towards him, and then says, well, I guess you're right. I can take you out for a nice meal and let you dress up nice in a dress. Says, I want you to buy a whole new wardrobe, and then you and I will do the town like it's never been done before. She says, darling, I don't know what to say. And then he says to her, fine, wives should be kissed and not heard. Oh, Reed.
Yeah. That's pretty extreme, even for Stan Lee's sexual politics here. But I mean, once again, though, we go back to this being what do they call it? A May-September romance? Is that usually the term? And he is very much a man from another era. He is a greatest generation dad and the baby boomer mom of this family here. So I just find it really fascinating. And I think we've had her talk about how she gets sick of wearing the jumpsuit all the time, which honestly, I would get sick of wearing the jumpsuit all the time. But this is also a really, I don't, on one hand, she is saying, look, I am setting my boundaries and I am telling you what I want. I'm being proactive. This is what I want. So on one hand, it's like, okay, well, if a person says, I would like a more domestic life, I actually want to be a spouse about the house, that is something that, you should be able to speak up about and assert. But the way that Lee scripts it, it's like, I want to be thinking of supermarkets instead of supervillains. I want feminine dresses, foolish hairdos. It's like, this could be a kind of a like, look, I'm sick and tired of this. I want to have a normal life, and a normal life at this day and age is being a housewife, and that's what I want. But at the same time, Lee just has to go other places with it, unfortunately.
Yes. Always a good test of dialogue is this something someone would say about themselves or something that other people would say about them? And generally speaking, women don't describe their own hairdos as foolish. That is generally something that other people say about them. So anyway, we cut to, so last issue was sort of, the issues have not been as touching or as cosmic as they were a year ago. But we had sort of a touching ending to last issue where they awakened a sentry of the Kree race on Earth who was here to sort of run a watch post, and they destroyed it. And as it was dying, it's like, I don't even know if the Kree still exist. I could be standing here as watchman for a long dead empire, and now I will never know because I am being destroyed. And that was a somewhat touching, what seemed like a done-in-one standalone story. But now it turns out it was not standalone. It was not done in one, because here we have the next issue we pick up on. Turns out the Kree are very much still a going concern. They are still very much an operative, big star spanning empire. And they are not happy that their sentry has been destroyed. So they send Ronan the Accuser, a sort of judge, jury, executioner type, to go to the planet to judge the Earth for doing this. He shows up. He's invisible at first, and then he goes ahead and creates a little aura of negativism, a little cone of protection, and allows himself to be seen then. And everybody's like, what the hell's going on? They go down there. Johnny is tooling around in an extremely silly looking hot rod and picks up Crystal, and Reed picks up Sue. But then they all disappear and they go poof. Ben is about to open a package from the Yancey Street gang, who we haven't heard much from recently. And the mailman thinks that he has been destroyed when Ben goes poof and then realizes it was just a coincidence. They all end up inside this cone. So Crystal does not actually meet her future husband, Ronan the Accuser. And then they get into a big old fight for several pages. Then we get to a bizarre little side plot where Alicia has been hearing the voice of someone. Then suddenly somebody comes through her wall. She doesn't actually know that because she's blind, but presumably she can sense it to some degree. Someone comes through her wall.
Well, yeah, no, she says there can't be anyone here. The doors are locked, bolted. No one could open them. So yeah, I mean, she does realize that something weird has happened.
Yes, and then he takes her out through the wall and they leave. So that was an interesting little side subplot. We're going to see more of that next issue. We get once again to the fact that the NYPD has been getting more and more hardcore weaponry, and the NYPD's gun on page 16 is one hell of a gun for the NYPD to be using. And they are trying to shoot down this cone and having no luck with it. Eventually, this becomes almost like an old 1962 Marvel comic of like, we must defeat this alien invader. And then they'll realize, Reed says at the end, with the failure of his mission, all traces of his presence here were removed instantaneously, but Ronan no longer matters to us. What does matter is the Kree now know they are dealing with an intelligent race and a fighting race, and I pray that such knowledge will keep them from ever returning. Well, that's something that used to happen constantly in 1962 and 1963 Marvel comics, is you would get a one-off alien invasion, and then when they would realize that, the human race are much smarter and more of a fighting race than we thought they were, now we shall never return. And Reed is kind of hoping that's going to be the case here, but he sort of knows that's wishful thinking, and that the Kree are very much going to return, unlike all those 1962, 1963 alien races. And they are going to be major characters from this point on. I think it was kind of fun to have the idea of the century of the long lost race, and only blatantly realizing that the race is long gone and he's the last century. I thought that was a fun story, but obviously it's better to have the Kree as a star-spanning empire. And of course, this leads to the question of, well, don't we already have the Skrulls as a star-spanning empire? Well, who boy are they going to start fighting with each other? And you're going to get two great Marvel Kree Skrull wars, and we're going to get so much good value out of the work that is done in this issue, even though this issue, I would say, isn't particularly the greatest issue of Fantastic Four. What did you guys think? George, we'll start with you. What do you think about this issue?
Yeah, you kind of nailed it. It's the creative team on Fantastic Four. It's after some of their greatest hits, and this one has always felt a little bit just kind of, I don't know why it's not as good as what came before and what will eventually come after too. It's just a little bit of a misfire is too strong. It's okay. I don't think I realized this is the first appearance of the Supreme Intelligence for that one panel. And it's interesting, like, did they already have the idea that he was a repository of all knowledge there? It says, I'm the living embodiment of power. There's so much stuff that's kind of cool in Kree society that's already hinted here. The whole idea that, like, they have the accusers who are, like you said, judge, jury, and executioner. It's all kind of here, but it's almost like it was vague enough it wasn't fully realized yet. That being said, all the bits with Johnny and the domestic bliss of Johnny and Ben are really fun.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell Jack really loves drawing the Thing. And you could tell Stan really loves scripting the Thing. So there's a lot of just weird little bits with him just being this really kind of corny Lower East Side sort of guy. Yeah, I agree with you. Reed is awful. Just what a creep. Yeah, honestly, and so is Johnny. Like, but like, I love Ben. I see why he was such an early breakout Marvel character. I will say it's interesting how much I feel like Ronan is a pretty nice design. Him having like a Caucasian skin tone makes the design not nearly as good. Yeah, the blue holds it together in a way that like he just kind of looks like a fairly generic villain this way. But, it's maybe what came later, because the Kree do end up being built into a very interesting, very martial society. The way that they have these accusers and the supreme intelligence, all these ideas are very interesting as a way to define this race of like this interstellar race. And it's all kind of here, but not fully defined yet. I just don't know if it's later writers filling in the blanks or if it was intended. They just didn't get it on panel yet.
And we should say that Ronan was later played by Lee Pace in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, and then showed up again in Captain Marvel, which was a prequel to that movie. And then the villain in the Marvels was sort of supposed to be related to Ronan in some way or another. So Ronan also will have a great history in the MCU, and will get to live an exciting life outside of comics as well.
Yeah, and I actually don't really like the design as we see him on page 6, at least. He looks very stiff and weird. That being said, that might just be that one panel. Just doesn't work for me very much. But yeah, actually, that panel is one that I wanted to address. So it becomes clear that the last time the Kree had paid any attention to Earth, human beings were early Stone Age. He's like, oh, okay, well, let's see what he says. They're no longer mindless savages. They appear to be in the secondary stage of racial advancement. Not the best sentence there, but okay. Their sociological structure is still economically oriented, and their scientific advances have far outdistanced their moral and spiritual concepts. In short, they are at the intermediate stage of social development. Though learning to master their physical world, they are still sorely beset by greed, hatred, fear, and other viruses of the spirit. And this is peak Stan Lee. This is Stan Lee at his best right here. That being said, and you were like, how much had they figured out about what the Kree was going to be? And then there's the question of how much had Kirby figured out what he was going to do with them versus how much Lee had figured out where they were going to go. But this critique sort of falls apart when you realize that the Kree are a eugenicist military dictatorship. So, I'm like, but there are many places in life where someone can offer a critique, and I entirely agree with the critique, but I absolutely have no interest in the proposed solution to the problem from the critic. And this is
frequently the case.
Yes, this is very, very much the case. But yeah, no, that's some of Stan at his best there. And I can't say I disagree with him here, except once again, he can still get bent because he's, from the Kree. The only other two things, there's one reference when a cop pulls over Johnny and Crystal says, oh, Johnny, it's a police officer. Johnny says, I kind of figured it wasn't Bobby Kennedy, which, is kind of weird these days. Finally, the other thing I had to say is at one point during the big knockdown dragout fight inside the cone of silence or whatever it's called, Reed says to Ben, there's still a chance. Use stratagem 32. He's in exactly the right position. Thing says, I hear you talking, leader man. Says, now shift your weight. Use the leverage of your shoulders. Now, stratagem 32, that would make a lot more sense coming from one of the X-Men, right? They are always training with these sort of maneuvers and stuff like that there. It really does. Even in the Avengers, you often get like training sequences and stuff there. That really doesn't seem to work with this book. But
that jumped out at me too. And I was like, that stratagem 32 seems to hint there's at least 31 others. Like what are they? Like, that's a lot to keep in your mind.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like Heinz 57, where, the previous 56 have just, it's like, well, those were just getting us to number 57. And now all we have to remember is 57. Or like preparations A through G.
Yes. Or WD 1 through 39. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to Strange Tales, which you are very lucky to get to cover. Strange Tales number 159, an absolutely gorgeous book.
Yes. So the cover, Strange Tales, we have Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Doctor Strange, both co-credited on the title line featuring the great Captain America. So we have a cover where Nick Fury and Captain America are having hand-to-hand combat in what looks like some kind of a battle arena, and there's what looks like flames and stuff all around them, which is quite a thrilling cover. Makes me want to know more. So inside, we get a fantastic photo background that Steranko is using here of what looks like Times Square. What it looks like is he just took a large photo, and this may be a bit collaged because the movie theater marquee up at the top of the page does not look like it matches the perspective of everything else there. So Jack Kirby has been using a fair amount of photo collage over the past year or so, usually to psychedelic effect. Occasionally not. There was a background in an issue of Thor where it was supposed to be like a Pittsburgh steel foundry. But for the most part, it's been very psychedelic. Here, this is very rooted and grounded in our reality. And so then he has the drawings of the characters that are clearly just drawn, cut out, and pasted up onto this sort of Xeroxed, or I guess not Xerox at this point, photostated photograph of New York, which is kind of neat. And neat that he's using it in a different way. Although I'm sure that Steranko would say that this is one of his, 150 innovations of comics that he came up with, even though, Kirby had been doing the same thing. All right. So they are done with their big fight against Hydra that wrapped up in the previous issue, and they've all got things that they're heading out to do on their own. Sitwell has some secret assignment he can't tell them about. Gabe is going to go sit in at a jazz club and play his horn. Nick is going to go back to his fabulous 60s mid-century modern bachelor pad we're going to see in a minute, and Dum Dum is going to go back to see his Irish family in Boston.
Yeah, and it's made pretty clear that Dum Dum and Gabe are being written out of the book, that they are, not going to be...
Oh, you think so?
Oh, I didn't pick that up.
I think it's pretty clear that they're... Well, obviously it's not, but I believe we're going to meet a whole bunch of... We're going to meet a whole bunch of new spies over the course of this issue, and I think those are going to be the main supporting characters on this book right now, and Gabe and Dum Dum are sort of moving on, because, of course, they're all very old. They all fought in World War II together, and it's a little strange that they're all still working together all these years later.
Clearly, they both come back at some point.
Yeah, they both come back. By the way, what color is Gabe Jones in the version that you guys are reading? Or I guess, George, you're looking at the scans that I sent you. Steve, you're looking at Marvel Unlimited. What color is Gabe Jones in that?
Oh yeah, he is definitely losing the war on ashiness in this one. Yeah, he is very gray.
And I must confess, because it was easier to use the app, I'm also there. So yeah, he is he is gray. He's a very dingy gray.
Okay, I would call in the original, I would say it's purple gray. He's sort of oddly purple gray.
Yeah.
And it is damn odd. Like, you had brown. I know you knew how to do brown. Why can't he be brown? It is the strangest thing in the world. Anyway, but yes, and then Laura Brown is written out of the book too. Everybody's being written out of the book. We're down to just Fury within a couple pages here. Laura Brown's written out on page 4. And so we need a whole new sporting cast, which we get over the course of the book, but it's an interesting reboot of the book here.
We do get to see a little bit of a flashback of Nick Fury's early life in, I'm guessing, presumably, it has to be the teens in New York. Either he was on one of the neighboring streets to Yancey Street and was also warring with the Yancey Street gang along with Ben, whether it's on the same block or on a block adjacent in another direction, or perhaps he was with the Yancey Street gang. It's not 100% clear to me, but one way or the other, he also had some association with the Yancey Street gang.
Partially taking place on Yancey Street is absolutely fascinating. It's interesting. Like, you were talking about reading a reprint of an old Kirby comic where he was talking about his history and street gangs growing up on the Lower East Side in the 19-teens. Kirby has nothing to do with this book, but it could not be more biographical for Jack Kirby. Here we have Steranko, possibly just out of his love of Kirby, as making him even more of a Kirby parallel than he has been, and giving him a backstory right out of Kirby's life. And it's interesting that Kirby then later would create a character named Mr. Miracle, who was explicitly based on Jim Steranko, and was based on Steranko's adventures as an escape artist. And so Steranko is clearly basing a character on Kirby's real life here. Kirby returned the favor by basing a character on Steranko's real life.
Oh, yeah.
So Nick and Laura Brown end up going through the barbershop false front into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. He offers Laura Brown a job with S.H.I.E.L.D., but she turns him down. He then goes back to his swinging mid-century modern bachelor pad.
It's
which,
awesome.
I mean,
It is great.
yeah. Well, and I've often thought that with Steranko's, once again, very mid-century modern bachelor take on Nick Fury, that seemed incongruous with his very much working class New York background that had been pre-established. But he does at least sort of acknowledge that here, that these two things coexist in the same person. Also on this page, the final panel, I might be reading too much into this, but where Nick is jumping down onto some subway tracks there really reminded me of the climactic sequence from the very famous EC short story Master Race.
Yeah.
Page 5, we have a fantastic full page splash where we see UNIT. And UNIT stands for Underground Network Intelligence Training, which is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s training center. We see people doing escape artist stuff, among other things, 2 different shots of true escape artist stuff. Now, I've never quite gotten, in what context would Jim Steranko have been being an escape artist as a kid in Reading, Pennsylvania in like the 50s?
I don't know.
I've never quite understood that.
I assume he signed up with the traveling circus. I don't know. I've never understood how I would love to read someone attempting to do an actual objective biography of Jim Steranko as opposed to him telling his own story.
I've always been a little bit like, I don't know if I buy it, but who knows? Anyway, also this page is done on duotone paper, although Steranko doesn't really take full advantage of what duotone paper can do. Could either of you describe what duotone paper is, or do you need me to do that?
Wasn't that, it was like activated with water where it actually gave like a kind of a texture?
It's actually, there were 2 different chemicals that you had to buy that went with the paper. So people who worked with it complained about the horrible smell that they would end up like really regretting having gotten into using this kind of stuff. There's some invisible ink that is printed all over the paper. And usually it is diagonal lines in one direction of one thickness, and then diagonal lines going in the other direction of another thickness, so that you could use the 2 developing chemicals to create these different levels of gray to be able to do tones throughout the page. The early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics were all done with this kind of duotone paper. There was also a Silver Surfer one-shot in the 80s, penciled by Byrne and inked by Palmer, that was done on duotone paper. And then the American Flag comic from the 80s by Howard Chaykin used a different style of duotone paper that had sort of a pebbly texture instead of these parallel lines.
Byrne used that pretty extensively in the 90s Namor series he did too.
Yes.
Oh, did he?
Yes,
and,
he did.
And then hilariously used it also on She-Hulk, which was a concurrent run, and just kind of ran out in the middle of a story. And She-Hulk once, he's like, whoop, I ran out of that paper. Like it was literally a note. It's like, and it's
right.
like back to normal. And all of a sudden, like that was all gone.
With the way that he wrote She-Hulk, that would have worked.
It was clearly he just had stuff left over from Namor. And I think he maybe left. It was Jay Lee was doing the art. And he's like, well, got to finish this off.
And one story that I think I remember, actually, it's right over there. I could go grab it and double check. But when they reprinted the early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics as large size color graphic novels, it had all this duotone on it, and it wasn't going to work with color. And so I think that they said in there that they literally went in with razor blades and scraped off the developed duotone stuff, which doesn't seem to make any sense that would work. But that's what I remember reading in the beginning of those collections. I need to go back and reread those collections. They were awesome. Anyway, Nick Fury shows up and he's here to train some new recruits. We see in the background our very first shot in a crowd shot of, and I forget her name. What is her name? The Contessa.
Valentina.
Something.
I'm going to just flip to the end. Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine.
Yes. So we see one shot of her in a crowd shot. We're going to see more of her in a little bit. So he at first is lecturing these new recruits on combat stuff and spy tech. And then out of the floor pops Captain America. This is a surprise demonstration of combat skills that it seems that Nick Fury was not aware was going to be done. So Captain America was waiting down there like a woman waiting to pop out of a fake cake. So they then end up getting into a great hand-to-hand combat. Nick Fury is able to use lots of his spy gadgetry. He uses an exploding cigar. Captain America hits that back to him. He's then able to smother the exploding cigar in his bulletproof jacket. He then pulls off his shirt, which we have earlier established is basically a big bomb, and is going to set that off with his cigar. But then he suddenly kind of faints. It turns out this is a delayed side effect of the invisibility pill that he took in, I think, the previous issue, or maybe it was 2 issues before. So that's a neat little continuity thing that they have in there. But as he faints, the Contessa jumps into the, we'd call it these days, the octagon here to go and try to help Nick Fury. Nick says, "Knock it off, lady. Where in blazes did you come from anyway? Nick Fury don't need to be wet nursed by no Girl Scout, now or ever. Besides, the spy game ain't no place for women anyway," which is one of the dumbest statements you've ever heard. I mean, Mata Hari, some of the most famous spies are women. They're great for this because either people don't pay attention to them and they're ignored, or they can use their sexuality to make men do foolish, stupid stuff. Yes, women are absolutely part of the spy game.
Yes.
So anyway, that is it. This is an important issue, obviously more important than I realized because of what Matt was saying about the supporting cast being swapped out here, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm like, why did they get rid of the old supporting cast? Maybe because they were too old, but it's like then really emphasizing how old Nick Fury is and that he grew up in the teens. And then the new characters they had the Gaffer, who is bald and white haired, and then they had Contessa Allegra Countess Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who has a big white streak in her hair. So they're not doing a very good job de-aging the book.
In the MCU TV shows, as she says, just call me Val, but don't.
The page where we see the flashback to Nick Fury's childhood, I really enjoyed. I know this is an artist who's been very influenced by Kirby, but did you all pick up on the strong Keith Giffen vibes on this page in particular? The page where we see like young shirtless Nick Fury running around, scrapping up with the Yancey Street gang. Like if you had shown me this out of context with just like the shots of like these young people in profile and these things, I would have thought this was a Giffen page.
That's fascinating.
I am not really that familiar with Giffen's stuff before he started channeling whoever that South American artist was.
Munoz.
Yeah, Munoz. Yeah. So no, I wouldn't have gotten that because that's what I think of when I think of Giffen.
He has a strong Kirby influence before that, and I think he was kind of known as that. But looking at this, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of Steranko in there too. I'm gonna say it's definitely Fury fought against the Yancey Street gang. Just to throw my own 2 cents in that, because he has the line in the little caption, like for example, the regular Saturday night social meeting with the gang around the corner. I think that's him messing. But I think that's great. What a cool little nod to throw in there that like the Yancey Street gang, these like quasi humorous characters from the FF, like, yeah, they were just like old skirmish partners for him.
Yeah.
His apartment's amazing. Like you said, it is cool. The Captain America fight is a little odd. It's nicely done, but like, I think it's a bad showing for the Captain and an especially good showing for Nick Fury, but that could just be whose book we're reading right now. But there's some really great panels there. But like Fury's just jumping around in a weird way that I'm like, this doesn't seem like the way I picture Fury fighting. It's kind of flipping about.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we get to Tales of Suspense that not only does Cap guest in Nick's book, but then Nick is going to guest in Cap's book as well. So, lots of crossover between.
I was actually wondering too, because I was unfamiliar with this. The character of Laura Brown, I thought was perhaps Sharon Carter.
But I felt like before we move on, like we talked about page 6 being a duotone page, but we didn't just talk about what an amazing page it is. You know, like there's a great moment in the first Wayne's World movie where he's in the middle of a conversation and he's like, wait just a second. And then he opens the door and there's a bunch of training ninjas inside the room. And then he closes the door and he says, I'm sorry, I just always wanted to open a door on a room full of training ninjas. And this is one of the all-time great panels of opening a door on a room full of training ninjas that you're ever going to see in Marvel Comics. The various forms of super spy training that everybody is involved with in this room are just absolutely amazing, and it's just absolutely gorgeous page. I can post that on our page as well.
Underwater gladiator combat in the same tank with a shark that is not interacting with them. Some kind of a like Spider-Man type suit that looks like it's also got other stuff going on. A guy trapped in a razor blade cage. Somebody else in very much more of a Houdini type escape act thing. A woman using martial arts against two different men at the same time. Once again, Nick, you just saw her doing this before your comment. And then a guy doing a somersault past what looks like some flamethrowers. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Every one of those guys could be the star of their own book. They all have crazy costumes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's one of those things like Kirby would do. Throw out so many ideas that you're just like, whoa. Like, there's a wealth of action and ideas happening in that page.
Yeah, you're lucky to appear when you did, George. I think that you're getting, a lot of Marvel's people were at their peak at this point. I think, Kirby was at his peak. Steranko was at his peak. Marie Severin was at her peak. I think you're going to see a lot of great art this month.
You're just saying that's all forgive Dan Santat.
Yes, I am.
So let's go on to the second half of the book. Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, The Evil That Men Do. Stanley Productions proudly presents a Roy Thomas, Marie Severin all-star amulet-studded artistic achievement in collaboration with Herb Trimpe inker, Al Kurzrock letterer, Irving Forbush popcorn popper, and it's done as either a Broadway show or a movie poster. It says held over 48th smash issue now playing. So once again, having great fun with the credits in these books.
Herb Trimpe continues to just do a gorgeous job with this issue. I think the splash page with Doctor Strange coming across the excavated ruin of his building is just gorgeously inked.
So yes, a few issues ago, the Sanctum Sanctorum was collapsed, and it was like folded in on itself or sucked in as though it was being crumpled up like a piece of paper by Umar. And at the time, we were like, "Whoa!" And Wong was in there, and now it's just gone. What the heck? Well, they remembered that happened, so Doctor Strange comes back and finds a pit in the ground where his home had been. Apparently the police did find this hole in the ground and put up at least some kind of a barrier before it. But it turns out Wong made it out in time and is able to tell Doctor Strange what happened. Yeah, and I think it's not quite on this page. It may be in a few pages, but there's a really unfortunate piece of dialogue where Doctor Strange refers to Wong as his bondsman.
Yeah,
which
that's not good.
I was like, does that mean what I think it means? And well, actually, bondsman means the person who does your bail bond for you. But bondman, without the S, is a synonym for slave.
Whoa.
Which is unfortunate. Anyway, I just figured I should point that out there.
Strange is able to restore his Sanctum Sanctorum on page 3, and it is totally off model, Marie Severin. That is not what the Sanctum Sanctorum looks like from the outside.
It looks like a brownstone.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
That didn't even occur to me. Wow. Okay. Well, yes, but he is able to recreate the Sanctum Sanctorum, similar to how he was able to recreate his Cloak of Levitation in the previous issue. And even all of his scrolls and his mystic objects apparently reappear in here. So he recounts how the problem he's in is that one of the things he did to get rid of Zom ended up essentially awakening everyone who might have the potential of becoming an evil sorcerer on Earth, and they might unite and then end up destroying not only this Earth, but every reality. And so the Living Tribunal said, you have I don't know how long, but as long as this so-called hourglass, so I don't know if it's an hour or a day or what, and when these run out, then you will run out of time to fix this situation, and then I will destroy the Earth. And then as all of these sorcerers are doing their stuff, there's a whole bunch of newspaper headlines in different languages, and so the one in Spanish says La Leche es verde. ¿Qué pasa?
But I loved that they were like, all right, we have to come up with a Spanish headline that even people who don't know Spanish will be able to understand. So they're like, well, even if you know very little Spanish, you'll be able to figure out La leche es verde. ¿Qué pasa? The milk is green. What's going on?
Yeah, but you're missing the best part on the page right above it in the Norwegian newspaper. Gamla Guba Fluga over Kronhuset. Vargar Har. I looked it up. That's nothing. That's like the Swedish chef was let loose.
Yes.
Yes. Bork, bork, bork. Do. We see that there's this one particular sorcerer who has an M scrawled on his cheek for some reason and seems to be of some Middle Eastern sort, just based on his clothing, is gathering together all of these evil sorcerers, just like the Living Tribunal was afraid was going to happen. And at first you think that he is trying to then be their leader. But then it turns out that no, he is trying to summon the one that will be their leader. And Doctor Strange shows up to their incantation just in time to see this summoned leader show up. And it is a returned Baron Mordo. So next, the power of Mordo. So he is the one, the evil sorcerer, who is going to be the leader of this cadre of evil sorcerers who is going to destroy not only this reality, but all realities.
Yes.
So that is it.
I love bringing Mordo back. He's been gone for a while. He's been chained up. You know, once again, I keep pointing this out every month on this book, but they were fighting not Uatu, what was his name? Kalu'u. They were fighting Kalu'u, and then Kalu'u was like, uh-oh, here comes Umar, I'd better get out of here. Then Umar is like, uh-oh, here comes Zom, I'd better get out of here. Then Zom was like, uh-oh, here comes the Living Tribunal, I'd better get out of here. Then the Living Tribunal is like, I give you an hour, and then it's like, we are going to summon Baron Mordo, who is going to be our new villain. And as far as I know, this has all been one day. This has all been one hell of a day for Doctor Strange. There's never been a time when Doctor Strange could have gone anywhere and taken a nap at any point in this process.
Or even a bathroom break.
That's why he's going gray.
Yeah, exactly.
I quite like this little story. It seemed like it was a bit of a housekeeping one, just kind of restoring some status quo, setting up the return of a big bad guy. But I mean, it's a solid art team. The Gamma Gooba Gloobus bit made me laugh out loud, which, you know, so like there was some cool, like when we see the other curses happening, you know, in addition to milk turning green and whatnot, there's like a little bit of a person being turned into some beast. Some woman's like, no, it's too horrible. And a guy's like, I did not mean, I merely uttered a curse under my breath. Like weird stuff's happening over the world. I'm like, this is kind of a cool little story in between what seems to be bigger stories.
Yeah.
Yep. And everything that the Living Tribunal said is actually true about how, like, it's going to be really bad if you let everyone who could be an evil sorcerer become an evil sorcerer all at once. And the Leche is Verde page is just one of my favorite pages we've had so far in Marvel Comics. Just the pile of newspapers from all around the world over the montage of various evil sorcerers erupting all over the world. I just absolutely love this story. And I love this new unnamed villain with the M tattooed on his cheek. I love having Mordo back. I think this whole issue is just gorgeously drawn by Severin. You know, she gets to play in Ditko's sandbox on page 8 with glimpses of other dimensions, the other dimension in which Baron Mordo is being held. And it's just gorgeous. This whole issue is just gorgeous. Amazing work by Severin and Trimpe.
I'm guessing that the M on his cheek is supposed to represent Mordo.
Yeah, he says that I wear the brand of he who we summon.
Okay, yes.
It's just a really good little story. Like, I think it's really solid. This is a big blind spot for me. I've read the Ditko Strange issues and then kind of skipped to like the Paul Smith, Roger Stern things. And most of what's in between, I have no idea. So I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
Here's the thing is that they're all great. Like Doctor Strange was never bad because after Ditko leaves, it's Bill Everett who does a really nice job. And then Marie Severin does an even better job. Really amazing. You get Dan Atkins for a while. You get Cohen for a while. Then the book is canceled. But then when it comes back, Barry Smith does a couple issues. Barry Windsor Smith does a couple issues that people always forget about. It's absolutely gorgeous. Just as gorgeous as you would imagine.
And Frank Brunner does it for a while, right?
Then Frank Brunner does it and it's absolutely wonderful run on the book by Frank Brunner. Then Cohen is back for a long time. And then you get the Marshall Rogers run, which is how Roger Stern began his run in the book. That's absolutely gorgeous. That's wonderful. Then Dan Green, the inker, does an absolutely amazing 6 issues as penciler. And then you get Paul Smith. So if you want to really knock yourself out as a reader and as someone who is a graphic novelist yourself, go ahead and just read the entire history of Doctor Strange. You're never going to get a bad run.
All right.
Never a bad run, but sometimes a bad issue. I will say Everett's first issue taking over from Ditko was subpar.
Oh, it's Rocky.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Should we go ahead and move on?
Yes, I believe so.
Let's go into Tales of Suspense featuring Captain America and Iron Man number 92, Before My Eyes, Nick Fury Died. So as you pointed out, we had Captain America guest starring in Nick Fury's book, and now Nick Fury will guest star in Captain America's book. But first, let's go ahead and cover Iron Man. Within the vastness of Vietnam, Stan the Manly and Gentleman Gene Colan, so he was Gene the Dean Colan over in another book, but now he's Gentleman Gene Colan, combined their titanic talents with Frank Giacoia, inker, and Sam Rosen, letterer, to bring you a blockbusting saga of startling suspense. So I'm going to dispense with this issue very quickly. It is, of course, fascinating that Marvel is still sort of supporting the Vietnam War, sort of not. On the one hand, when Flash got called up in Spider-Man, Flash was like, yeah, I'm going to go fight the commies. I'm going to go to Vietnam. And everyone is like, good job, Flash. We're glad you're doing that. Are we going to sign up? Are we going to go to Vietnam? We are not. We are going to wait until we get drafted. And no one in Marvel is quitting their day jobs and signing up to go fight in Vietnam. But here we have Iron Man just showing up for a little bit. And indeed, Iron Man's origin took place in Vietnam. As you recall, Iron Man said in his origin, "This will solve your Vietnam problem." As I said at the time, yes, unfortunately, America's problem in Vietnam was otherwise known as Vietnam. And we never did quite solve our Vietnam problem, now did we? But so then just a quick issue of Shellhead hanging out, helping the troops in Vietnam. He goes up against a Vietnamese villain named Half Face, who has a big iron jaw. And that's basically it. I don't want to get into this issue at all. Half Face has metal dogs. I always am a fan of metal robot dogs, so I approve of that. Then at the end, Half Face seems to be vivifying some sort of Frankenstein's monster type creature under a blanket. Iron Man has been fighting a lot of Frankenstein's monster type creatures recently, but we'll find out what happens next issue when it says next issue face to face with what? And that is how we leave off this issue. Guys, what do you think of this issue? We'll start with you, George. What did you think of this issue?
I think the art on Iron Man himself looks really nice. A lot of kind of not iconic, but like really solid looking drawings. Half Face has way more than half of a face. His bottom,
true.
He has a fully visible bottom lip. He does, as near as I could tell, he has a full face. He's just wearing a really weird high collar. So disappointed in Half Face.
He should really be called 4/5 face.
At least, yeah. So he's the truth in advertising is just not there. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so just a couple things. At one point, they talk about how Half Face is living in this castle. Well, of course, there are Southeast Asian fortresses that have been there. It's a long-standing culture, but this is a European castle that is up in the mountains of Vietnam. Which and there's a river coming from the castle on page 7, panel 2. Which is not how rivers work, but okay, sure, why not? Unless that's just the raw sewage that's coming out of the castle. I don't know.
Oh, you're right. It's flowing uphill.
Yes.
Or it's flowing downhill.
But it's originating in a lot of water in that castle.
And there's a valley right there. Like you can see the valley just to the left.
Suspicious.
Yes, that's kind of bothering me a little bit. And then, with the robotic dogs that he's fighting, I'm just like, oh, those are those horrifying Boston Dynamics things that we keep on saying videos of where people are like, isn't this cool? And where I'm going to be like, you're not going to be saying that in 10 or 20 years when they're keeping us all in line. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. We covered this issue very quickly, but I just didn't want to get into it. Either of you have anything else to say?
Heck no.
No, this is no longer a heck book, so you can't say heck no anymore. So let's go ahead and move on to the back half of the book, which we will spend more time on because it is wonderful. Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, Before My Eyes, Nick Fury Died. So we have an odd sort of a page where, well, the wonderful news here is it says Marvel's truly titanic twosome reunited once more. Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby, embellished by Joe Sinnott, lettering by Artie Simek. So I think this is the first time we've had Sinnott and Kirby on Captain America, and it is a treat. It is just absolutely gorgeous. This is maybe the most beautiful single issue of Captain America they have published because it's the first Kirby Sinnott issue we've had. Kirby has been gone from this book for about 6 months, I should point out, and wasn't sure he was going to be coming back. He did the cover to this book, so that was a hint that, can we dare to dream that Kirby is going to be back on Captain America? He is. We have a beautiful beginning page of Steve Rogers in a airport it's sort of oddly drawn in that it looks like Steve Rogers has a little daughter who is trying to hold his hand. It's
I look at that, and that looks like Jack Kirby is putting in a drawing of a daughter or niece or family friend or something like that to be like, hey, I'm going to put you in an issue of Captain America. It just looks like that sort of portrait to me.
Yeah. So then Captain America, meanwhile, uses his little video phone to check in with the Avengers. So we have, I think, the first time ever, the Avengers drawn by Kirby and Sinnott. And I love seeing Kirby and Sinnott's Avengers. It's sort of a taste of what might have been that we never got to see if they had been assigned to that book. Meanwhile, we cut to Sharon Carter, who is still not named Sharon Carter, nor is she even named Agent 13 yet, I think. I think she is still just an unnamed S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And I always like good old-fashioned spy stuff. And she says, would I have deserted S.H.I.E.L.D.? Would I have defected to you? Would I risk my very life to lie to you? And they go, you would if you were still loyal to Fury. Like, yes, that's exactly what you would do if you were a S.H.I.E.L.D. counter spy. And she says, but I have proof. Here is a tape recording which I secretly made. You can hear it yourself. You hear Fury's own voice telling his agents he'll be at the barbershop in case they need him. And they go, hand it to me, woman. And then they shoot a hole through the center of the voice recording. And they're like, the mere fact that you turned it over proves that you mean your word. And so then we have Captain America continuing to wander the city. He is attacked by a giant assassin. So, of course, one thing we have not really discussed in discussing this month of books over the last 2 episodes is whether or not Kirby is phoning it in or whether or not Kirby is giving his all. Clearly, he's not phoning it in. Clearly, he's doing amazing work on all 3 of these books, Captain America, Thor, and Fantastic Four. But is he willing to create great characters anymore is the question. And I am not a big fan of this Mecha assassin who is here. I don't think it's a great Kirby design, but I did really love the Enchanters. And I guess somewhere in between, I felt about Ronin in terms of how good design Ronin was. How do you guys feel about whether or not Kirby is giving us his best designs, and how do you guys feel about the Mecha assassin?
So Mecha Assassin looks to me almost exactly like a recolored Kree Sentry.
That's funny. Yeah.
It looks very similar. The color scheme is uninspired. He's got kind of like a mustard yellow top, a purple face and legs, and orange gloves. He's not he looks distinctly Kirby without being something that is going to, you could see as soon as this comes out, like, this is not a character who's going to last. This is probably, I'll say one and done, but I bet you they appeared randomly in a few issues here and there once and twice, but like not a long staying creation for him.
Yeah, I will agree with you about the color. I think that really works against this being a villain that we might want to see again. Both the dark purple face, which you don't really get to see much of it, and then that sort of light, that light tan. It's the color on mine, at least. It looks like the color of the old tan M&Ms that they replaced the red M&Ms with back in the 80s or 70s or whatever. That's what it looks like, and I never liked those. They always seemed to taste worse because they were so ugly, and that's kind of what it does to the Mecha Assassin here.
Yeah, I should say though that you're like, oh, this looks like a one and done villain. Occasionally, Kirby would do one and done villains that were absolutely insanely amazing, and this is not one of those. But so then we get Fury. I always want to say Kirby when I say Fury. We get Fury and his barbershop getting an actual haircut at his barbershop. Fury seems to have forgotten that this barbershop is really just a front for S.H.I.E.L.D. And although, is it even that? Is he at an actual barbershop? Is he not at his barbershop that's a front for S.H.I.E.L.D.? That's a little unclear.
Yeah, actually, that might be a good point. Maybe this is another front that they had to sort of throw the AIM folks off and say, oh, well, we've heard they've got a barbershop front, so this is clearly that. Yeah, I don't know. That hadn't occurred to me.
But so then Captain America just happens to be sort of going by when he sees Meccano attacking Nick Fury, and he jumps in to save him and fails to. Meccano kills Nick Fury, and it's like, oh, now I feel bad about that. But then it turns out that this was all a setup, and this is a life model decoy of Nick Fury, and Captain America has screwed the whole thing up by walking by, and now he's blown Sharon Carter's cover, and the whole thing now looks like that she was trying to set AIM up for failure. I should point out that AIM is back, by the way. I failed to mention that. Turns out AIM, who we thought were destroyed several months ago, are back. So now I always point out on this podcast, whenever I can, when we get to no prize book moments. And I always point out that here we have a moment that ended up in the Marvel No Prize book, which was a collection they published in the 80s of their biggest blooper panels. Well, the whole Marvel No Prize book builds up to a big 2-page sequence of what they call the worst Marvel blooper of all time. And here it is. Captain America is fighting Meccano, and he says, okay, mister, I'm ready for you. So let's wrap it up. Only one of us is going to walk out of here under his own steam. And we turn the page, and he says, and it won't be me. I think he meant to say it won't be you. He says it won't be me.
Yeah, I think he forgot. I thought he was like, one of us is going to have to go down, and it won't be me. But on the previous one, he thought only one of us is walking out of here, and it won't be you. Yeah.
Was the no prize explanation in the heat of the battle? He just kind of tongue slipped. Because I mean, I could see if I'm in the middle of fighting Mecco the assassin, and I barely speak coherently when I'm not punching out robots. So maybe just in the midst of this action, I just kind of miss. What was the no prize explanation for this?
I don't think they had one. They didn't have explanations for everything.
Oh, okay.
Some of them were just like, oops.
I think the idea of the Marvel No Prize book is that, you know, these were in fact not no prizes because these were too big screw ups to be explained away. But they didn't explain anything away in the Marvel No Prize book.
I did read in some reprints this is actually corrected. So I was glad to see in the Marvel app they've returned it to Captain America, basically telegraphing he's going to lose this fight as he does a weird awkward punch upwards.
Nick Fury comes out and explains that Captain America just screwed everything up, including screwing things up for Sharon. And he says, but we're going to try to fix it. I need you to volunteer. Next issue, 1 versus AIM. So that is this issue. George, let's start with you. What did you think of this issue?
I mean, it looks beautiful. You asked about the character of the Mecco assassin. Would he be memorable? I honestly feel like with a different color scheme, he might have. It's just it's a real head scratcher of a color scheme. Seeing the Avengers is super sweet. My favorite drawing in the entire issue is on page 2 of the Cap story, panel 4. There's just a close up of Hercules looking beyond outraged, going, "Mortals, yes. Can ye not accept what is said without seeking hidden messages?" And he looks like he's about to murder everybody. It's so fun.
Oddly, he doesn't really look like either Kirby or Sinnott to me in that case. If this were like a few years later, I would say that they might have had John Romita, once he became kind of the de facto art director, redraw that face. But he wouldn't have been doing that at this point, I wouldn't think.
You actually have a good point. He is also, when Kirby drew Hercules normally, he was larger. So I wonder if there wasn't some sort of communication across books where there was another character in there and they had to kind of like in inks fix it or something.
Yeah, because he's not on the previous panel.
You got a little Quicksilver up in the corner smiling, not saying anything, but like I feel like they're trying to show the entire roster. Yeah, but anyway, I love it. Yeah. It's like my new favorite drawing.
Yeah.
While we're on that page 2, final panel, I will once again point out that your secret evil society should not have big branding all over all of your vehicles. This says AIM on the front and on one of the tail fins. Just that you know, this is Advanced Idea Mechanics. We are not gone. We are back. And I know the storytelling thing of, you know, you just want to get that across to the reader, but still it seems silly. Also, on the top of that page, this page has actually a lot to say. That just seems so modern to me that Steve Rogers has his magazine in front of him, and then he's got his little video camera sitting in the magazine. And here it's supposed to be able to hide it, but these days it's really sort of like, I'm going to sit down and actually read my stuff that's printed on paper. But first, I'm just going to pull out my cell phone for a moment. And then next thing you know, you just end up using the book or the magazine or whatever as like a little cell phone holder.
You know, I didn't even realize that because, it looks like he's holding a Nokia phone. Like this looks just like it's the same shape and size. This is the part I mentioned in the last episode, too, where Steve is just hanging out in an airport before going home.
That is weird. Yeah, what is he doing in an airport?
Well, there's that line where the Avengers say he's entering into a depressive period. I think this is a behavior that he kind of shows sometimes. Like, you know, he's a man at a time. What's he got besides being Captain America? Sometimes he just hangs around airports. They don't know what to say about it. They're just like, okay, you do you, Steve.
Yeah. I'll just hang out here at the airport before heading home, you know.
It's weird.
Well, I guess he has nothing waiting for him back home. He doesn't have a family
or
cat. Anything like that.
Yeah, or something.
Not a dog, because they need attention every day. Yeah. Cats, though, you can just be like, just overfill the bowl. You can leave them for a few days. It'll be fine.
I should point out at the end of the issue, there is a letter from Tony Isabella, who would go on to become a great comic book writer and creator of Black Lightning and all sorts of great characters, and would write a wonderful book called 5,000 Comics You Must Own that also tells his sort of personal story as well.
That's awesome.
But it was cool having a letter from him. But should we go ahead and move on to, we've been recording for quite some time. Should we go ahead and move on to our final book, The Avengers?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's go ahead and finish up this month with the Avengers. As always, we end up with the Avengers. That has been very disappointing for many, many, many episodes until recently when we've now finally got John Buscema. It will get even better once we get rid of George Russos going by the pen name of George Bell. But I'm still going to take what we got now, and I will take the better stuff when we get it as well. So on the cover, the Red Guardian. Here he is, destined to be the most talked about supervillain of the year. And wait till you learn his startling secret identity. In the background, we have some Buscema tech, which, Matt, as you pointed out, is not necessarily your favorite.
No.
We've got the floating Avengers heads up top. And actually, they look like the sort of happy faces that you would get if you were introducing a new hero that you were wanting to bring in, which, rather than the upset or angry or fearful faces that you might expect for something like this. And Red Guardian, of course, has now appeared in the MCU in a couple of different things so far. He's going to be in the soon-to-be-released Thunderbolts movie. He was also in the Black Widow movie and in the, was it the third season of What If?
Yeah, I'm currently watching the third season of What If, and he's all over it. Played by David Harbour.
Yeah. Yeah, the season finale of that, man, you're gonna be the Kirby Crackle in that is just nuts. What they did to bring across Kirby Crackle in animation, you're gonna love it. Okay, you often talk, Matt, about how every issue of the Avengers starts out with the Avengers fighting, and up top they sort of almost acknowledge that the impossible has occurred. For the 48 hours that have elapsed since the defeat of Diablo, peace and quiet have reigned supreme at Avengers Mansion. Then, just in time for this issue to start, they start fighting again. So Stan Lee elatedly edits and extols a Roy Thomas, John Buscema powerhouse pièce de résistance, inked by George Bell, again, pen name for George Russos. And if you can think of a better place on this page to print our Cavorton credits, consider yourself no prized, because it's sort of written on a panel of metal in the Buscema tech in the background. So we begin with something really kind of dumb. Quicksilver has just now stolen Hawkeye's bow and Captain America's shield, as he is now flying around Avengers Mansion. He has figured out that he can flutter his legs in such a way that he can now fly. And he takes away Hercules' book because Hercules isn't paying enough attention to him. And apparently the Hercules is reading the Iliad. You would think that he would know everything that happens in there and would have read it many times by now. Maybe that's just his happy place. He just goes back and rereads it all the time.
Yeah, that's my impression.
So the fight continues for a little bit. We get something that I think we've seen this at least once before, but we see it many, many, many times in the future, which is Hercules in the middle of the fight just stops fighting and says, "Hold, mortal, thou hast proven thy courage, thine inestimable skill. From this day forth, the Prince of Power shall call thee friend." So that seems to be a pattern with him, that he gets into a big brawling fist fight with you, and then if you're able to give him what for, then he's like, all right, you know what, we can be buddies now. Not somebody I would be hanging out with personally. So the doorbell rings and in comes and of course it looks like there's just this. They don't talk about him having been let in by Jarvis or, having come from some ante room or something like that. It's just knock, knock, knock. And then they open the door and here's this guy walking right into this high tech room through a door that says, "Caution, do not pass beyond this point." Presumably he was allowed in by Jarvis or something like that previously and we just didn't get it. It turns out that the Wasp has now reached her 23rd birthday. I actually thought she was a little bit younger than that. But one way or the other, apparently this is when her trust fund turns into just her inheritance. And so she is now rich, I say. And she is very, very excited to be able to go out and do all sorts of shopping because, of course, that's what ladies like. Meanwhile, though, Hawkeye is still upset that the Black Widow has been captured behind the Iron Curtain while being a double agent for S.H.I.E.L.D., trying to prove her loyalty to the West. He has gotten some sort of word from some underworld person. Remember, he started as a villain, and he still has contacts in among the lowlifes in town.
He's wearing a white trench coat, which is a striking look.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would show up. Like, I feel like maybe if I was going to be walking the runway in Paris or something, I'd wear a white trench coat, but I'm not sure I'd show up to a seedy bar in one. But all right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I gotcha. That's a little bit weird. So anyway, he shows up to meet his contact on panel 3 of page 5. I absolutely love the guy in the foreground. That is the most John Buscema face we have gotten so far in John Buscema's appearances.
I totally agree. I was going to
make
make that as a comment.
That is the most John Buscema face that is ever John Buscema'd. Oh, by the way, one thing I just noticed right now is there's a poster in the background in this CD bar on panel 2 for a boxing match of Slammer Sauron versus Freddy Frodo.
Nice.
I had not noticed that at all. It doesn't show up very well in the printing here on the original comics, but I imagine it shows up better in yours.
I just now saw that. That's nuts. Hawkeye ends up getting into a fight with a bunch of the seedy folks in this seedy bar, but then in the end, once he fights everybody off, of course, without even his bow and arrow, he is holding his own until somebody uses a chair to smack him right through a glass window. Of course, no one ever gets cut going through glass windows like this, because that's just not how things work in the Marvel Universe. But then at that point, Hawkeye does get his bow and uses some of his high-tech arrows to win this massive brawl. He then does finally agree to actually pay his source for the information about where the Black Widow is, even though he's like, yeah, no, I gave my word, so I will do it, even though you're a lowlife and I should turn you in. Hawkeye then goes back to Avengers Mansion. He's like, hey, Hercules, you want to come with me and go rescue my girlfriend from the commies? And Hercules just like, yeah, is it going to be a fight? Yeah, sure, man, let's go. So they then head off in this plane. Once again, where Hawkeye got his pilot's license, I don't know. He is always the one flying these Avengers high-tech aerial vehicles. But, sure, why not? So then meanwhile, I think that in Marvel, I guess that Russia and China never quite had the falling out that they did in our reality. Because they hated each other just about as much as either one of them hated us at this point in time.
Yeah, I think America generally was unwilling to admit that at this point. I think modern historians look back and can see that, but I think that America was like any intimations of Sino-Soviet split were part of the evil Russian scheme.
Yeah, just propaganda, basically.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, and it's just weird that they had the Black Widow brainwashed for a while by what was clearly the Chinese rather than the Russians, when she is Russian and had been a Russian spy, sent back, and then they send her back as a double agent again with the Chinese, and then the Chinese bring in this Russian observer to show off the Red Guardian, who once again is Russian, but has been developed as a sort of super soldier by the Chinese. It's just weird. It's strange. Anyway, the Red Guardian has, instead of a shield that he can throw around like Captain America, he instead has this like little belt buckle puck discus thing that he throws around that has some magnetic properties where he can have it come back to him. So he's demonstrating this. Hawkeye and Hercules show up, and again, it's really unclear. Like, they come in their aerial vehicle, and then they're coming down to fight the communist hordes on a wire of some sort, but it looks like they're indoors when they're doing this. So I don't...
Yeah, pretty strange. You skipped over. So the first 10 pages of this book are all about Hawkeye going like, I'm going to use my underworld contacts to figure out where I can find Natasha, and then I'm going to go find her. Well, then he announces on page 11, I didn't dare dream that Tasha was still wearing the homing beam gizmo I gave her, but she is, and it led us straight to her, who says these East-West romances can't have a happy ending. So we did not need the first 10 pages of this book. It turned out that he had a homing beacon on Natasha this whole time and could have easily found her at any time. Or for that matter, told Nick Fury where she is.
Let's just go ahead and say that maybe it's a short-range homing beacon. He can find her if he's within 100 miles. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway, Hercules then is just like, hey, you know what? I think that she's probably through this rock wall. So let me just go ahead and knock it down. Well, they get in there and find a flamethrower squad that just happens to be hanging out right inside that wall. Okay, that's a little bit odd. But then the flamethrower squad really doesn't do anything. They're just like, oh, wait, no, we're going to get out of here and let the Red Guardian take care of this. So why did we see the flamethrower squad in the first place? I don't know. But the Red Guardian knocks Hawkeye out like immediately with his belt buckle thing. So then Hercules and Red Guardian have a fight. Red Guardian ends up trapping Hercules inside the, what is it called? Psychotron?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the...
Yes.
That the name of the thing? And we get to see what nightmare, what fears Hercules has, which is really interesting. We get to see John Buscema draw a Hydra, a flame-breathing Hydra. Now, they're sort of acknowledging here that the actual mythological Hydra had many heads that grow back, rather than the secret society Hydra that has many arms which grow back. We're at least acknowledging that these two things can exist side by side. But even in his nightmare fighting the Hydra, he is still doing a really good job fighting the Hydra. Because, I mean, this is Hercules. He's not going to, be paralyzed with fear. He's going to get in there and do it. So Hawkeye recovers as the Red Guardian is coming to get him, kicks Red Guardian in the face, but then is captured by Red Guardian, and he's put in a little test tube looking thing, a little glass tube right next to Natasha. Again, when anyone is captured in any sort of thing in comics, I always have to wonder, where's the bathroom?
Yes.
You never know. And so now the Red Guardian takes off his mask, and Black Widow's like, you! And we don't recognize him. At first I was wondering, is this going to be Boris, who was her old partner, her old spy partner when she was first introduced, which George O'Connor, I'm not sure whether, why am I saying your full name? George, I'm not sure. So, George, are you aware that when Natasha was first introduced, she was basically just a Bullwinkle joke?
No. I can't believe
Yes.
I never put, because I've even read those issues and I never really put that together.
Her spy partner in her very first appearance was the man known only as Boris. So it was Boris and Natasha who were being sent to go infiltrate Stark. So anyway, so I thought this was going to be Boris at first. If this is Boris, then then he doesn't look anything like Boris. But one way or the other, he is her husband, apparently. And Hawkeye's like, oh, you're married. Oh, well. I guess it doesn't matter. And it's just sort of like, dude, it doesn't, they're estranged, clearly. Come on. This is, don't give up so easily here, man. She seems to like you. We get another reference to the bamboo curtain again as the rest of the Avengers figure out what has happened and that they need to go after these folks. And all the other Avengers just come together and say, Avengers assemble. And so then we are going to be going to China in the next issue. It says next ish, the Valiant also die.
Yeah, I forget, in the MCU, is the Red Guardian Black Widow's father? I think he may be.
He's
is he? I don't know.
He's not her real father, but they were placed in a family unit and he acted as the father.
Yes. So sort of in the Americans type situation where
exactly,
they were a fake Soviet spy family. Yes. I'd forgotten that. So I'll go ahead and jump through this before we'll ask George to say something about it. I gotta say, I think this may be 12 issues in a row in which the Avengers have broken out in a fight amongst themselves in the opening pages of the issue. And it's getting real tiresome. I'm real tired of it. And even though we changed pencilers and it still didn't stop happening, implying that Roy Thomas really is writing this book, because it would be really weird if John Buscema was taking over the writing of this book and he could just continue doing the same old tired trope. But it's very strange.
Yeah.
I got to say that the bar fight is great and is good practice for John Buscema, who will have a lot of bar fights in Conan comics coming up. I like how we've had a couple people get tossed into the Psychotron so far, and it was just like, it just looked like a flashing light show, and we couldn't see why it was so bad to be tossed into the Psychotron. Now we really get a sense of how terrible it is to get tossed into the Psychotron, as we see Hercules suddenly imagining himself battling this Hydra, and it's like, okay, this finally seems like a very intimidating piece of technology. It is a little disappointing that they set up the Red Guardian to be the Soviet answer to Captain America, and then we don't get to see him fight Captain America, but presumably we will next issue.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a setup for that. In the Ultimates comics, they will have their own version of the Red Guardian, who will be foreign governments, in this case, Middle Eastern governments' version of Captain America to fight him, and it will be an awesome fight. I really love the Brian Hitch art on that fight in the Ultimates comic. And that was my thoughts on the issue. George, what did you think about this issue?
A lot of stuff. So I remember I did a read through of the entirety of Avengers up until the Stern era. So there were some bleak periods you went through, and this was an upswing. I remember because we had John Buscema coming. I was like, oh, thank God. I had kind of forgotten the bit that Quicksilver was able to fly vibrating his legs. I'm like,
yeah, they forget it too.
Yeah, I feel like my no prize reason for why he doesn't is he gets horrible upper thigh chafing.
Yes.
And so, like, after this is over, he's just like laying in bed like, I made a terrible mistake. We're never doing this again.
They make anti-chafing stick for that. They make chub rub stick. He could just go ahead
and do
and
it
go
a couple
against
thousand times a second. It's his pants probably burst into flame. Early Quicksilver in general. Quicksilver is one of my favorite characters. Early Quicksilver, there's so many fun, like the way he would do that, the pinball thing, where he would just kind of like bounce around in like a little circle, and like there was a lot of weird uses of his powers, and I'm like, this is right up there,
like Bouncing Boy and the Legion of Superheroes comic.
Yeah, but like beforehand, like it just so the bar fight is amazing. This is actually a pretty good showing for Hawkeye. Like he's getting some good character development. Hercules is another one of my favorite Marvel characters. I think they did a pretty good job of like updating that mythological character for Marvel. Like, so I enjoyed seeing him like getting a team up. I want to point out Hawkeye gets absolutely brained by that little hockey puck twice in like rapid succession. He gets, like you said, like as soon as he appears, he's like Hercules is doing all the heavy lifting. He's like, wait, don't do everything. I got to do, and boom, he's down, unconscious. And then like 3 pages later, again, and the sound effects. First time it's whoosh and scrack. And then the second time it's just a huge thock. But I mean, Hawkeye has brain damage after this. There's no way he recovers from this sort of this drubbing.
Yeah, and he has no superpowers, no super stamina or invulnerability or anything. No, this is just concussion after concussion.
Multiple concussions in a row, and then waking up in like a tube that, as you pointed out, probably has like a grid on the floor so he could just relieve himself. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
Apparently it didn't give him a concussion, it just damaged his ears.
Yeah, they do a great job with that in the Hawkeye MCU miniseries where they're like, oh, you've got hearing damage. Why do you have hearing damage? And he sort of just gives a look like, how could you even ask me that? And then it has a quick montage of all the explosions that he has been privy to over the course of the series.
I don't remember that. That's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually just rewatched that as a Christmas thing this year. That's now one of our things, along with, what are we going to watch this year? Are we going to watch Miracle on 34th Street? It's Wonderful Life, or the Hawkeye miniseries. It's great. So when Hawkeye gets into his brawl, when he throws off his coat, for some reason, Roy Thomas has him say, nuts, his fist flung open my blasted coat. They're like, oh, it's Hawkeye. And also his mask and cowl just sort of appear on his face at that moment. It's like, no, he throws off his coat and pulls up his cowl. What do you mean that the fist just knocked it off? When Red Guardian is first being unveiled, literally from behind some curtains, he's on a little dais, a little circular thing where he looks like a little figurine that's been put on a little circular stand. Well, that's weird. But then also, so that the Chinese functionary is saying, you would require a demonstration of our hero's prowess? It shall be done. Prove your worth, loyal one. And Red Guardian says, he shall have his proof. I vow it. And then the Russian general says, bah, I have heard such vows before. In Poland, in Finland, even in devastated Hungary. It will take more than a mere oath to impress General Brushov. So, I mean, that seems like a bit of a non sequitur. I mean, like, sending in the tanks in Hungary, what does that have to do with proving the worth of the Red Guardian?
He's saying the Red Guardian is saying, I can stand up to you. I've got valor. I can stand up to you. He's like, yeah, we heard that from all the countries we crushed.
Is that what it's supposed to say? Okay.
Wait, actually,
right. But they didn't crush Finland.
Let's face it, Finland is a shadow of its former self.
Is the Red Guardian then? Is he a Chinese agent? I just put that together.
No, he's Black Widow's ex-husband. He's Russian.
Yeah. So, but like, why is the Chinese general introducing him?
I don't know. That's why I mentioned that earlier. Yes, it is just so weird that this is the Chinese have developed this agent who is Russian but working for the Chinese, and they're showing him off to the Russians. It just makes no sense. And yeah, I just went and double checked that panel where Hercules and Hawkeye are swinging into action, and I'm like, are they outside? Hercules actually says, "We have reached the very center of this base. 'Tis passing strange, no aircraft menaced us." So yeah, I have no idea how they're getting out of their aircraft down there. Anyway, those are just the last couple of things that I saw. But yeah, overall, I'm really enjoying the John Buscema art, and I'm looking forward to getting more and better inked John Buscema art. There really were some bad panels inking wise in here, particularly in the ballroom brawl scene.
Yeah.
There's one where there's just black ink just sort of smeared randomly in the background but between characters. Page 5, panel 3. It just makes no sense and it looks terrible. But I'm looking forward to getting a new inker, but I'm enjoying what we've got in the meantime.
Okay, we should go ahead and wrap things up. George, thank you so much for joining us for all 9 books. My gosh, you're putting everyone else to shame. You've done such a good job here today. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks. I want you to call this the O'Connor barrier now. Like, really throw this down as a gauntlet for people. Be like, oh yeah, you've been here. You do your 4 books. This guy did 9. And one of them was a Werner Roth X-Men. So just think about that.
You're terrible luck to have the last Werner Roth X-Men. If you just come 1 month later, you wouldn't have to do it.
Right?
Yes. Well, I really appreciate it. I think you were in luck. I think you had a lot of really great books this month, despite having a Werner Roth X-Men.
Yeah, I agree.
There was a lot of great books.
A lot more hits than misses, for sure.
Yeah.
I totally and I mean, well, among the hits, I mean, Daredevil. I just can't say, this is the peak. I mean, that's peak Silver Age Marvel and peak Daredevil for that matter. I don't think either of them really got better than that.
No, there is no legendary good run on Daredevil, is there? Okay, that was my daughter who just texted me to come pick her up. So, well, George, thanks so much for coming out. This has been a really fun run of books. We've got to go. America, we will see you next time.
And the rest of the world as well. Thank you, everybody. Take care and stay safe.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.